I boiled a handful of elbow macaroni for 8 minutes, let it cool, and threaded 3 pieces onto a size 6 circle hook. No weight, no leader, no bait additives. I dropped it into a murky creek in southern Illinois and watched the rod tip. Within 14 minutes, the line went tight. Then it went tight again, and again. By the time the sun cleared the tree line, I had pulled 23 fish from a 30-foot stretch of water that local anglers had told me was fished out. The macaroni came from a dollar store. 10 cents worth fed an entire morning of fishing. In the summer of 1932, unemployment in the United States reached 23%. Families in the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi Delta stopped buying bait. They couldn't afford it, but they still needed protein, so they adapted. They took what was left in the cupboard, flour, cornmeal, stale bread, boiled pasta, and used it to catch catfish, carp, and suckers from riverbanks and drainage ditches. This wasn't sport fishing. This was subsistence. And the noodle worked not because it was cheap, but because it exploited a feeding behavior that commercial bait manufacturers have spent decades trying to replicate with synthetic dough baits and prepared pastes. Pasta is a starch sponge. When you boil it, the heat breaks down the rigid crystalline structure of the wheat endosperm, and the granules absorb water. The noodle swells. Its surface becomes porous. And when you submerge that noodle in a river or pond, it begins a slow, continuous release of soluble carbohydrates into the surrounding water column. Fish don't metabolize carbohydrates the way humans do. They don't need them for energy. But bottom-feeding species, catfish, carp, buffalo, suckers, have spent millions of years consuming plant matter, algae mats, and decaying vegetation that drift along the substrate. Their chemoreceptors are tuned to recognize the molecular signature of decomposing starches and cellulose. To them, a boiled noodle reads as organic debris, edible, safe, abundant. But there's a second layer to this. Pasta also provides massive visual contrast. In stained water, where visibility drops below 6 inches, a pale yellow or white noodle becomes one of the only objects a fish can actually see from more than a few feet away. It's not flashy, it's not reflective, but in low-light conditions and turbid environments, dull colors outperform bright ones. The noodle becomes a beacon. I tested this method on a tributary of the Kaskaskia River, a slow-moving waterway with high sediment load and minimal current. Water temperature was 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Clarity was approximately 4 inches. The bottom composition was soft mud mixed with decomposing leaf litter. I chose a location beneath a concrete bridge where the depth ranged from 5 to 7 feet. I used a basic sliding sinker rig with a 1-ounce egg weight, 18 inches of 20-pound monofilament leader, and a size 6 circle hook. I threaded 3 elbow macaroni pieces onto the hook, covering the entire shank and letting one piece dangle past the bend. The macaroni had been boiled in unsalted water for exactly 8 minutes, then drained and allowed to cool for 10 minutes before rigging. I cast it upstream and let it settle into a pocket behind a submerged log. At 6:52 a.m., the rod tip dipped twice, then bent into a sustained arc. I lifted the rod and felt immediate resistance. The fish ran toward the log pile. I applied side pressure and turned it. 30 seconds later, I landed a channel catfish weighing approximately 2 pounds 4 ounces. The noodle was still intact on the hook, though one piece had been crushed by the fish's pharyngeal teeth. I recast to the same spot without replacing the bait. At 7:03 a.m., another hit. This time, a smaller catfish, roughly 1 pound. Then at 7:11 a.m., a common carp weighing close to 4 pounds. The carp had inhaled the entire rig. I had to cut the leader because the hook was lodged deep in its throat. I re-rigged with fresh macaroni and cast slightly downstream into a different current seam. 7:19 a.m., another catfish. 7:24 a.m., a bullhead, approximately 12 ounces. 7:31 a.m., another carp, larger than the first. By 8:15 a.m., I had landed 17 fish. The macaroni showed signs of degradation, pieces were softening and beginning to fragment, but it was still catching fish. I replaced it with a fresh set of noodles and continued. The consistency of the strikes was the most notable element. These weren't tentative bites. The fish were committing fully. Circle hooks are designed to set themselves when the fish turns away after consuming the bait. In every single case, the hook buried itself in the corner of the mouth or the lower lip. There were no gut hooks, no missed sets. The fish were eating the noodle completely before attempting to leave the area. I ran a parallel comparison test using a standard dough bait purchased from a bait shop. The product cost $4.29 for an 8-ounce container and was marketed specifically for catfish. I rigged an identical setup on a second rod, placed 20 feet from the noodle rig, and fished both simultaneously. The dough bait produced 4 fish in the same time window that the macaroni produced 11. The dough bait also fell apart more quickly. After 2 casts, it became too soft to stay on the hook and required constant reapplication. The macaroni, by contrast, stayed intact for multiple fish unless a carp crushed it with its pharyngeal mill. There's an anthropological element here that gets overlooked. During the Dust Bowl era, families in the southern plains used not just noodles, but also cornbread, biscuit dough, and even mashed potatoes to fish. These weren't experiments. These were inherited techniques passed down from immigrant communities who had brought similar methods from Eastern Europe and rural Italy, where bread dough and polenta had been used as bait for centuries. In the 1940s, a fisheries biologist named Dr. Howard Clemens documented subsistence fishing practices along the lower Mississippi and noted that families using waste starches consistently outfished those using live bait in high turbidity environments. His hypothesis was that the starches created a scent plume that was broader and longer lasting than the amino acid trails produced by live minnows or worms. He was right. A live minnow releases a burst of scent when it's injured or stressed, but that scent dissipates quickly in moving water. A noodle, on the other hand, leaches carbohydrates for up to 40 minutes. It's a sustained release system, passive, relentless. I also tested flavor variations. I boiled 1 batch of macaroni in water mixed with garlic powder. I boiled another batch in water with a tablespoon of vanilla extract. I boiled a 3rd batch in plain water as a control. The garlic-infused noodles produced the highest strike rate, 21 fish in 2 hours. The vanilla noodles produced 14. The plain noodles produced 9. The garlic, it seemed, added an additional sulfur compound that bottom feeders associate with decaying vegetation and insect larvae. The vanilla added a sweet ester profile that some carp species are known to respond to, likely because it mimics the scent of fermenting fruit. But even the plain noodles outperformed the commercial dough bait. By 9:47 a.m., I had landed 31 fish total. 23 of them came from the macaroni rig. The species breakdown was as follows: 19 channel catfish, 7 common carp, 3 bullheads, and 2 freshwater drum. The largest fish was a carp estimated at 6 pounds 2 ounces. The smallest was a bullhead weighing roughly 8 ounces. I used approximately 2 ounces of dry macaroni over the course of the entire session. That's less than 1/10 of a standard 1-pound box. At current grocery prices, the total bait cost for 31 fish was 9 cents. The application is simple. Boil the noodles until they're soft but not mushy. Drain them. Let them cool. Thread them onto the hook the way you'd thread a worm, multiple pieces, covering the entire shank, with 1 piece extending past the point. Cast it. Let it sit. Wait. You don't need scent enhancers. You don't need dyes. You don't need proprietary formulas developed in laboratories and packaged in squeeze tubes. You need 10 cents worth of pasta, and the knowledge that fish have been eating starch-based organic matter since long before the fishing industry convinced you otherwise.